attorneys, our estate planning attorneys, I have over 3,000 students. I ask each attorney to explain what a will is and what it covers. I have 227, only 7 could explain it, that the students in the class said that they could understand. Can you believe that? Okay, interesting, right? You know, because attorneys don't exactly explain things where you can understand. Because when you walk out of the room, you say, what about a smart? I never learned anything but you smart. That's not my goal. When you walk out of this room, I don't care what you think about me. Well, actually, I care. But the fact is, the truth is, when you walk out, boys, I want you to say, man, I learned some things from this guy, Brian, I never knew before. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I want to know what a pour over will is. My will is a pour over will.
I'm going to cover that right now. Okay. So, basically, the first thing you got to understand is, even though we have a will, we do not want to use the will. Everybody has a will. We don't want to use the will. Every time you use the will, something bad happens. Well, what's so wrong with that? One, the will is the only document that has to be authenticated. In fact, the state of Hawaii requires that you have an original will, unless it's a fire that burnt it. What do you mean authenticated? They gotta verify that that is your last will and testament. So we asked you, when we give you your folder, the will is in there original with all your documents. So we tell you, put your will into a fireproof box. Well, what's the process of authentication? Probate. All wills gotta be probated. And there's 3 things wrong with probate. Number 1, public knowledge. By the way, I don't want to see any hands in here. Rhetorical question. If any of you have been divorced, I can find out what your divorce was on all the accusations, the money, where it went. Why? Boys, you know why?
No, I'm divorced. I want to know why.
Because the law said it's public knowledge. So if you go down to the county office, I can pull up your file. It tells me all the accusations, all the time you went to court, all the attorneys, everything, and tells you what's the settlement. So when you go and get probate, that's what's going to happen. That's number 1. Number 2, when you go to probate, there's a time delay. There are 3 kinds of probate in Hawaii. You've got those probate called, we call it the memorandum, which means if your probate estate is less than 100,000, it could be worth 100 million, but only 100,000 gets probated. As long as it's less than 100,000 and no real estate, it's through what is called a memorandum. Just fill out a form and just go through probate real quick. The other 2 kinds of probate is a supervised, and the other one is a non-supervised, and that's anything that has a real estate or anything above 100,000. When you get that, Louis, number 1, it's going to take an average of about 2 years, and if it's contestable, I have one now, Chinese family, all you guys know who they are, okay? It's been 44 years since the mother and father died. Still never settled. Still never settled. By the way, they went to court because the siblings, I think there's 7 of them suing each other. They had spent almost $400,000 and no resolution. Okay? So, you get that. I can talk about it, or look at the Fongs. It's in his newspaper, you know, Market City, you know that one? Okay. Because if they came to me, they wouldn't have that problem. Why? Because you give the property to the people, they can grumble. You put them in the trust, they cannot grumble, okay? Because of the way that you sign it up. Look, parents, if the kid's gonna get mad, I think the goal is you don't want them to get mad with each other. You don't mind they get mad at you, but you're dead. Does it make sense? Right? You know, Mom, she's really stupid, man. She would do this stuff. Not Grace, you're my sister. You still, no, you know, you can stuff like, no. Okay? So, that's what you gotta understand. Now, the will, remember the will, okay? There's a question Lois brought up. Well, how come they tell us we gotta get one will? The will is a standard document. because there are several things in the will that the will does. Okay, number one, when you die, there may be a need to have an executor, executrix, or personal representative. The will assign that person. Some of the insurance companies says, I don't want to deal with the beneficiaries, I want to deal with the executor. Okay, fine, then we send a letter of testamentary to the courts, they appoint that person in the will, that person will now contact for the beneficiary change, okay? The second part of that is this, and this is what I have as a big problem. If you ever knew anybody who died and has a child below the age of 18, you have a guardianship problem. You have a guardianship problem, okay? Even though, and a lot of the problems that we have is the divorce rate in America, Lois, would you say it's pretty high?
Definitely. And
Pretty
second
high,
marriages
right?
are worse than first marriages and on and on.
70% of the people who got divorced has children, by the way, okay? So now, let's say for example, I die, I give my daughter some, an asset, and I don't put anything inside there, she dies. My granddaughter turns 18, guess what? It's an adult, she gets all her inheritance. My trust does not say that. My trust also says when you get the income. Why? Because almost all the trust that I read says there's no age. And the attorney says, why won't put age? Look, my kids are in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Yeah, but if they have kids that's under the age and they die and the grandchildren get in there and they just graduate from high school or they're 18, 19, 20, do you want them to get the income? Maybe not. So the trust can do that, okay? Not the will, the trust. So the will also have another provision besides point party. They have a very important thing, Lois brought it up, it's called the pour over provision. You see, we all know that the trust is going to be the vehicle, the revocable living trust is going to be the vehicle that's going to manage all of your assets. But in order to manage it, it got to be in the trust. So what if you have a property that's not in the trust because you bought it after you brought me and you forgot? How are we going to get it in the trust? Well, when you die, the trust has an arm, the will has the arm, grab the property, and even though going through probate, we'll put them into the trust so the trust can protect the property for the benefit of your children. What do you mean protect? In case they get divorced, in case they get sued, in case bankruptcy, in case they get alienation, all that kind of stuff, including if it's going to be taxable to them. It's all protected if you do it correctly. Okay? Any questions? So the will, we hope we do that. We create the will, but we don't want to use it. Okay? The pour over provision is there as a catch-all. Now I can tell you something, whenever you sign the documents with me, on the final stage, you sit down with me and I go over all of your assets, and I tell you which supposed to go into that trust, and then I tell you how to do it, and I give you the form that you use so that you can go to the bank. And the bank don't understand because sometimes you get new people, they call me and I walk through it with them. Okay? So that's what the will is for. You don't want it for too much more. Okay? The will also is to avoid the guardianship for the grandchildren in case your child dies. See, because here's another thing. Your daughter marries this guy, you have 2 children, and the children is young, okay? Don't lose me, Mike, don't lose me, don't lose me. So if the guy's falling asleep, if that person dies, okay, and if the wife dies, and you got young children, and the man is over there, and you get these 2 children, what's the chances of that guy getting remarried?
Hopefully good.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question. The new mother gonna favor his old children or only her children? See? Okay, so the trust is designed that the assets is only protected for your children when you die and cannot inure to the stepmother. And then you have special provisions in there called the ascertainable standard that the money can only come out for health, education, maintenance, and support of the 4 children. But it also says, no checks can go to any one individual. Health, medical expenses for the children, gotta go directly to the doctors, to the dentist, to the hospital. Education, Puno Hall, Stanford, not to the spouse, okay? Maintenance and support, HEMS, health, education, maintenance and support. Maintenance and support has 4 categories: food, rent, clothing, transportation, okay? You die, you get children, he will remarry, okay? The money cannot go over here, can only go for your children's health, education, maintenance, support, okay? Plus, we'll put a provision inside there that says, if he remarried, he disinherited.
I just have one more question on the divorce decree.
I can't hear you.
I have one more question on the divorce decree. You talked about pulling it up. How would that be in effect with your estate?
Are you talking about the will?
The will?
I mean, I don't hear the first part.
Okay, you were saying that they would pull up the divorce decree. How would that be effective with any of this?
The divorce decree will tell you how we can split up the property before you die. Okay? Once you died, then the guardianship would have been established. Okay? When the trust is established because you died, 99% of the time your husband will be the trustee. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
Now let me ask you a question. You're my wife, we have 2 children,
Okay.
okay? You're dead.
Right.
I married this woman. She comes into my life. She has children. I got a trust that you have created that I administer. There's $1 million in there. I write the check and I give it to her. Who's gonna stop me?
Nobody, right?
Nobody.
Yeah. that's
Not
what I
your
read.
way. My way is different. My way says that I cannot write a check to anybody else or unless only to my children. And my trust says that upon your death, there's going to be 2 trustees. And another reason why there's another trustee is simply because in a trust, 99% of the time, the attorney's going to tell you that when you die, your trust, which was revocable, which means we can change it, the minute you die, it becomes irrevocable. And it's protected against lawsuits and all that. But when you take a look at the book, under this section, it talks about credit protection for your child's inheritance. It tells you under an Internal Revenue Code section, 672C, it says this: Jody, if you set up a trust for your kids and you put your kids as a trustee and one of them get into a bad accident, get sued, and they're the trustee of the trust that you created for her, she lose, they can take the trust assets. Why? Because 672 says she's a direct lineal descendant and that is her trust and she's permitted to touch it. Therefore, no attorney has ever told you that. They always put your kids as trustees, your wife as trustees, but they don't tell you if she gets in trouble, she gets remarried, she can take the assets out. Nobody will tell you that, right? Do you have a trust? That's the way your trust is written. My trust says that if you die, we're gonna put your husband in there or your kids in there, but they can get sued. You know, you drive, you've had a moving ticket, sure you have moving tickets. You never plan on getting a ticket, but you got one. You never plan on dying, but you did. So even though the chance of this happening is slim, I gotta put in clauses inside there that your kids can get in trouble and they're gonna bleed out the trust. You don't want that. So my trust says if I'm the serving trustee of my mother's trust for me and even my siblings, my trust says I can resign as trustee and I can appoint someone other than a direct lineal descendant, my cousin. He's not a direct lineal descendant. After we settle the lawsuit, then he put me back on, I can do that. We support 672C. Nobody does that. Show me one, I'll buy you lunch. Okay? Any questions? So, another thing is the big mistake that people make is, anybody has been to